The story begins with the death of the male protagonist, unexpectedly. He was a poor adventurer, the lowest rank due to his poverty. This required him to wake up early daily to take on guild tasks. While most adventurers formed groups to explore dungeons, Lighter was different. He was aware of his lack of strength. After 10 years, he remained a low-tier copper adventurer, rarely wanted by any team. However, by fighting minor monsters at the dungeon's edge and collecting materials, he managed to feed himself and save a little money. He was safe and cautious until one day he entered the oft-explored Mizutsuki dungeon and discovered a hidden passage. The last person who found such a passage had already begun to level up alone. Unfortunately, Leader's luck was not as good. The potential high-level items inside blinded him. He hoped to gather more information to sell to the guild for a large profit, but he encountered a formidable dragon instead. Dragons in this world varied in form, and Lighter couldn't be sure if the creature was a dragon, but it was immensely powerful, reminiscent only of dragons. As a low-tier adventurer, he was no match and was swallowed whole. When he next opened his eyes, he had become a skeleton, still sentient, but clearly no longer human. If he returned to the city in this form, he would likely be purified by the temple at the gates. To survive, Lighter had to wander the dungeon. Since the Mizutsuki dungeon was an old, often cleared site, regular adventurers seldom visited, except novices like Lighter. Now a skeleton, he couldn't speak and had to fight his own kind. As a human, he could defeat skeletons, but now, lacking muscles, he couldn't wield a sword. Fortunately, a balanced matching system brought him equally matched opponents. Both skeletons fell to the ground, but Leader, retaining human intellect, used magic and his equipment to shatter the opposing skeleton. Alas, born from the same root, why be so eager to destroy each other? What, smashing skeletons can buff him? No worries then, explode away? Later knew a scholar specializing in monsters who had mentioned that monsters might evolve just like humans. Thinking this over, Later decided to fight more monsters, absorb magic, and perhaps evolve back into human form. He began farming monsters in the dungeon. Meanwhile, the monster scholar, not seeing Later, had to start cooking on her own. Later was lucky to defeat a slime and obtain its core, along with the corrosive slime's mucus, a popular ingredient in town for cosmetics. At the same time, the Adventurers Guild mentioned Lighter. It turned out a new female swordsman had recently arrived. The guild planned to find an experienced veteran to mentor her, but they didn't expect Later to be absent from the town. Additionally, the female swordsman was eager to earn money, so the receptionist recommended she try the Mizutsuki dungeon, the least dangerous one. After his death, Later no longer needed to eat or drink and could spend nights farming monsters, gaining a lot of experience. Now, his strength had returned to its human level, even slightly surpassing his previous human self. He avoided groups of monsters, knowing he couldn't take on many at once. Later possessed 3 different types of power, similar to spiritual roots, which were incompatible with each other. This prevented him from becoming a high-ranked adventurer. Most people would have returned home to farm or found other work, but Later dreamed of becoming a legendary adventurer like his idol. Unable to improve his strength, he decided to enhance his knowledge about monsters. He studied with the town's monster scholar and took on simple commissions to sustain himself, becoming an otherworldly scholar. Unexpectedly, he found himself transformed, but as long as he was alive, he couldn't give up hope. In his second battle against a slime, Lighter realized he wasn't just lucky hitting the core, he had become stronger than when he was human. No wonder someone often said it was better not to be human. After defeating another slime, its mucus suddenly clung to Later, evolving him from a skeleton to a ghoul. If he could keep leveling up, he might become a vampire, indistinguishable from a human, especially since his voice had also returned. Albeit still harsh, as a ghoul, Lighter could now handle 2 goblins at once. After the fight, he heard combat sounds in the distance. A blonde female swordsman was fighting in the dungeon. Knowing his appearance was not appropriate, Later stayed back and watched. He didn't recognize the blonde swordsman, unusual since he knew the local adventurers well after 10 years in town. Guessing she was new, he intended to observe secretly, but intervened when she fell into a trap and was cornered by skeletons. Although her sword skills were decent, her combat experience was lacking. Later stepped in to eliminate the skeletons, startling the woman since a talking ghoul was indeed frightening. Fortunately, he dropped his weapon and using his raspy voice, managed to explain his identity. The female swordsman, Lena, perhaps grateful for Leiter's help, was willing to communicate. Seeing Leiter produce a large bag of money and ask her to buy clothes, Lena agreed to help. They left the dungeon together, though she remained cautious about his true nature. Generally, adventurers report unusual monsters found in dungeons to the guild immediately. However, Leiter thought Lena was not that type of person, though he was prepared to be wrong about her. Lena returned to town and inquired at the guild reception about Leiter's name. At that time, Leiter was still in the dungeon, relentlessly farming monsters. He smirked, realizing that the talents he had always desired had descended upon him after his death. Meanwhile, Lena arrived with a pile of clothes and returned the remaining money to Leiter. She was still somewhat afraid of Leiter's current appearance. Leiter understood. He would be scared of a ghoul too. Opening the package, it contained a long robe picked by Lena to cover most of his body, along with shoes and other gear. Lena had even inquired at the guild about the shops, and considering that Leiter shouldn't be seen by others, she thoughtfully prepared bandages. Leiter was touched by her kindness and attention to detail. Though he now wore a cloak, his face was still conspicuous. Lena pulled out a mask from her bag that fit Leiter perfectly. However, once he put it on, it wouldn't come off. Lena felt guilty. The mask wasn't bought at a regular store. Attracted by a roadside stall mask after shopping, she bought it because it was cheap. She had checked carefully to ensure it wasn't cursed, but the price should have been a giveaway. Leiter tried removing it with magic, but his power was insufficient. He wasn't angry since he needed a mask to hide his identity for now. He planned to seek a cleric's help to remove it once he recovered. Lena felt guilty, believing Leiter was not a bad person, and decided to try accepting him. Leiter told her not to force herself, and that it was okay to stay away if she was scared. However, Lena was true to her word and soon accepted him. With his disguise, Leiter could also return to town. On their way back, Lena mentioned she had registered as an adventurer in the capital, where famous adventurers were too numerous and not suitable for a newcomer. That's why she came to the small town's guild, due to its 2 dungeons, hoping to quickly become a competent adventurer. Leiter advised her to take it slow, as life is precious, and anomalies like him were rare. This made Lena laugh. Arriving at the town gate, they couldn't use the usual entrance Leiter frequented, as he was well known there. So Lena led him to another gate. However, Leiter wanted to separate from Lena in case his monstrous identity was exposed, which could implicate her. But Lena felt she owed Leiter for saving her life in the dungeon and wanted to repay him by accompanying him on this adventure. Thus, they entered the town through the other gate. Having an identity plaque helped, though Leiter's attire was too eye-catching. Fortunately, Lena explained that Leiter had been injured in battle, resulting in a hoarse voice, and the mask was cursed. They planned to seek a cleric to remove the curse when they could afford it. The guard saw the wound on Leiter's ear and confirmed the mask couldn't be removed, eventually letting them through. To avoid involving Lena, Leiter slipped away after entering the city. He planned to thank her once he had returned to his original form. He first went to see Rowling, his friend who had taught him about monsters. Upon seeing his decaying palm, Rowling immediately sensed that something was very wrong. Rowling had already decided to contact the guild to search for Leiter, not expecting him to find her first. After discovering Leiter's transformation, she inquired if the dragon was still in the dungeon. Leiter shook his head, unsure. Rowling then asked if he was still himself. Although he retained human memories and thoughts, he had died once after all. Faced with Leiter's hesitant response, Rowling confirmed it was indeed him, especially after hearing about his goal to become a legendary adventurer. Leiter expressed his desire to continue adventuring, but his current appearance prevented him from visiting the guild. He asked Rowling to help him pick up quests. She agreed immediately, also inviting him to stay at her house as part of her research collaboration. As Rowling held 3 jobs, it was a rare opportunity to study a human turned into a monster. She promised not to perform dissections, but wanted to collect some skin flakes. Thus, Leiter stayed at Rowling's house, helping with cleaning. Rowling bought the materials he gathered in the dungeon, leaving Leiter quite satisfied. He then visited a weapon shop, where people were somewhat frightened by his attire. At the weapon shop, the female owner learned about Leiter's 3 abilities and mentioned that the blacksmith would tailor weapons to his needs. Leiter mentioned he was staying at researcher Rowling's house, confirming his identity to the shop owner, who did not probe further. Back at home, Rowling was studying the traits of undead monsters, increasingly certain that Leiter was still himself. She recalled their first meeting when she had accepted a forest task, and an experienced adventurer recommended Leiter, who wouldn't compete for jobs but could help carry gear and gain experience. At that time, she was the youngest PhD in history and had become a silver-level adventurer. Having achieved much in life, she had lost interest in the world and moved to the border town to pass time. During their gathering outings, Rowling noticed that Leiter, originally just meant to carry gear, had better gathering skills than her. Not only that, but he could also detect monsters early, alerting Rowling to use different magic against them. This made Rowling realize she was out of touch with adventuring, prompting the town's guild to worry about her safety. They assigned Leiter as her guard, an experienced adventurer mentoring a newcomer. Knowing his own limitations, Leiter learned a lot about monsters. Rowling, for the first time, took an interest in someone and decided to befriend Leiter. Over the next 10 years, she continued to observe him, seeing his relentless pursuit of a goal, which caused her to change as well. After discussing with the owners of the weapon shop, Leiter learned that his custom weapon would take some time to be ready. However, the couple gave him a great sword to use temporarily. They were aware of Leiter's identity and suspected he might be under a dangerous curse. They kept his identity confidential to avoid trouble for their shop, but were concerned for him, as Leiter had a strong reputation in town over the past 10 years. Rowling told Leiter that his type of mutation was unprecedented. Leiter expressed his desire to continue evolving towards human form, so he took a quest and went to the dungeon to farm monsters. Along the way, he saved an adventurer named Calero, who was originally a town chef, but turned to adventuring to pay off his debts. As a newcomer, he had no team, and would have been seriously hurt if not for Leiter. Calero asked to join Leiter, who was initially wary of him, knowing some adventurers have bad intentions. However, pitying Calero, Leiter let him tag along to carry gear. They went to a new dungeon entrance Leiter had found, hoping to find a magical artifact to sell. Calero was surprised, knowing dungeon information could be sold for good money at the guild. He promised not to claim Leiter's discovery. Leiter, convinced Calero was not malicious, decided not to use the dungeon information himself and helped Calero search for magical artifacts. However, Calero was careless and stepped on a teleportation circle, getting sent to another room. Logically, Leiter should have abandoned him, but didn't want to completely turn into a monster, so he stepped into the circle to rescue him. There, they faced a giant skeleton. Calero fainted, and there was no exit visible. Leiter realized they had to defeat the boss to leave the dungeon, despite the bad luck. Leiter, aiming to be an idol-like adventurer, quickly defeated the giant skeleton. When Calero regained consciousness, he found that Leiter had treated his wounds. Leiter, showing him the magic stone from the giant skeleton, offered it to Calero. Calero felt he hadn't earned it, wondering why such a strong adventurer would need his help. Leiter revealed his cursed hand, explaining that he couldn't freely enter the town and needed Calero's assistance. During their time together, Leiter confirmed Calero's good nature, and given his need for funds to sustain his shop, Calero was still uncertain. Leiter then made another offer. Once Calero reopened his shop, he could eat there anytime for free. Calero tearfully accepted Leiter's kindness and promised to manage his shop well this time. Leiter showed him the teleportation exit, invisible to Calero, but visible to him. Calero chose to trust Leiter. Together they returned to town. Calero's wife was relieved to see him, and worried about the magic stone he received from Leiter, fearing another deception. However, Calero explained how Leiter saved his life and their agreement. His wife decided to trust his judgment. The couple asked for Leiter's name, intending to repay his kindness in the future. After leaving, Leiter felt somewhat despondent. He almost wished Calero had been evil, which might have justified taking action. Leiter was increasingly controlled by his monstrous instincts. Feeling uneasy, he staggered back to Rowling's house and embraced her. However, in a moment of confusion, he bit her. Rowling immediately realized Leiter's consciousness might be blurred, so she knocked him out. Although she did not recommend being attacked by Leiter, she hoped he would be lucid. When Leiter woke up, He realized he had done something regrettable and immediately apologized to Rowling. She had anticipated this, knowing that ghouls crave human flesh and blood. Full of remorse, Leiter checked Rowling's bandaged wound and decisively used his magic to heal her. Perhaps because he had defeated the giant skeleton, his magical powers had strengthened, and his body had mostly recovered, making him look more like a severely injured human. Even his mask could now be partially removed, revealing half of his face. His eyes and voice had also improved significantly. Rowling speculated that consuming human blood might relate to these changes, as ghouls can evolve by devouring blood. Rowling shared her hypothesis. Normal monsters evolve into higher forms, but Leiter's evolution was rare. She suspected that a monster's consciousness could influence the direction of evolution, similar to leveling up, which must be done step by step. With effort, Leiter might evolve into a vampire and eventually return to being human. However, each evolution likely has specific conditions. While leveling up relies on defeating monsters, breakthrough materials would need to be sought elsewhere. Excited by her theories, Rowling prepared to study Leiter's body further, which terrified him. The next day, Leiter went to apologize to the blacksmith at the weapon shop, as the temporary weapon he had borrowed was now ruined. Understanding that Leiter had entered an undeveloped dungeon area, the blacksmith realized why he had transformed. Almost slipping Leiter's name, they both acknowledged each other's identities. The blacksmith decided to craft another weapon for Leiter, since the previously ordered one was not yet ready. After receiving the new weapon, Leiter expressed his gratitude and continued his quest in the dungeon. He also noticed that Calero's restaurant had opened. Leiter indeed participated in Rowling's research. As an undead ghoul, Rowling concocted a poison strong enough to kill a demonic bear, prepared with an antidote nearby. She watched as Leiter drank the poison, ready to intervene. Fortunately, Leiter proved resilient. The poison had no effect other than tasting awful, though a healing potion proved useful. Additionally, Leiter had no desire to sleep, and though he had an appetite, he craved human blood. To prevent Leiter from losing control and attacking others, Rowling voluntarily drew her blood and stored it in bottles for Leiter to consume before he lost control. Leiter accepted her kindness and made sure to only take a drop each time to prevent himself from losing control. Leiter felt his body had mostly recovered and was ready to take on quests himself. Rowling mentioned that despite being a low-rank adventurer, Leiter was famously reliable and had a high reputation at the guild. The guild even wanted to hire him as a staff member, but they hesitated to ask since he seemed keen on continuing as an adventurer. Rowling encouraged Leiter not to underestimate himself. Then, she had an idea. Since he couldn't use his original identity, she suggested he register a new account. Leiter approached the receptionist at the guild. He kept his first name, but changed his last name to Rowling's, jokingly making it seem like he had married into her family. The receptionist was momentarily confused, having heard rumors of a strange person entering and exiting Rowling's house, and thought Leiter had indeed become part of her family. Leiter pretended not to know his former self, claiming to be Rowling's relative. The receptionist, though disappointed, helped him register the new account. Leiter's name was common in the country, making it less suspicious. She handed him the new guild card and reminded him to cherish his life, suspecting that the townspeople knew his true identity, but chose not to expose him. With his new account, Leiter headed to the dungeon where he encountered some rookie adventurers. Normally, he would have guided them, but his current appearance was too frightening. Thus, Leiter began his solo leveling journey, planning to explore the dungeon he had previously discovered and provide information to the Adventurers Guild, which would help his new account level up faster. Leiter used a teleportation circle to reach a new part of the dungeon, which turned out to be a bedroom with a skeleton on the bed. Curious, he approached to inspect it, but was suddenly attacked by a mage who mistook him for a thief. The mage's powerful magic destroyed Leiter's clothes, leaving him in just his underwear. However, upon realizing Leiter was a ghoul, the mage stopped attacking and even offered her cloak as compensation. Leiter then discovered that the mage was a female elf. The female elf explained that the bedroom was important to her and asked Leiter not to disclose its information. In exchange, she gave him a device that could automatically navigate dungeon paths and transported him out of the dungeon. Back in town wearing the cloak, Leiter shared his experiences with Rowling. She felt that Leiter must be cursed, given the strange occurrences he kept encountering. Upon examining the device, Leiter discovered it displayed the routes he had taken in dungeons. Moreover, it showed the names of adventurers currently navigating those dungeons in real time, and could switch between dungeon maps. However, it was not a complete map. New areas would only unlock as Leiter explored them himself. The cloak he received was also in good condition. Leiter guessed that the elf's ability was at the level of a gold-ranked adventurer. He decided to return to the dungeon to talk with her but was denied entry. Leiter figured it was because he wasn't strong enough and planned to try again later. Meanwhile, many in the guild were worried about Leiter's whereabouts, since he was well liked in the area. At that time, Leiter, using his alternate account, took on a quest above his level. The receptionist was concerned, but knowing he had previously defeated such monsters, agreed to let him take the quest. The next day, Leiter arrived at the guild with a storage bag and presented the monsters he had subdued. As a newly registered low-rank adventurer who had single-handedly defeated 3 high-level monsters, Leiter immediately qualified for an upgrade test. Rowling was curious about the name Leiter used to register. Learning he had used her surname, she choked on her tea, joking about how it was no different from him marrying into her family. Leiter explained it was to protect Rowling's reputation, claiming to be her relative to outsiders. Rowling wasn't concerned about public opinion. Since leaving the capital, she hadn't thought much about these matters. Moreover, Leiter didn't want to trouble her, but Rowling felt that with Leiter doing the laundry, cooking, and cleaning, he was actually taking care of her more. She told him not to be too formal, adding humorously that they seemed like an old married couple. After obtaining the qualification for the upgrade test, Leiter promptly participated in the next day's assessment. The test included multiple types, with both written and oral exams to accommodate those who couldn't read or write. Leiter easily passed the written test, and then it was time for the practical exam. Leiter was paired with 2 adventurers he had met before, one a frontline fighter and the other a healer. The guild's task for them was to reach a marked location on the map in the Crescent Dungeon. The first team to arrive might receive a reward, indicating that the assessment would likely involve competition. Beyond this, there were no other restrictions. Upon reaching the dungeon entrance, as his teammates prepared to rush in, Leiter stopped them and bought a map from a nearby stall. It turned out the guild had set a trap from the start by providing an outdated map from 15 years ago. The maps at the stall were expensive, costing 2 silver coins each. Leiter only wanted the map of the first level and managed to negotiate a significant discount. The vendor recognized Leiter as a seasoned adventurer and advised the other 2 to listen to him if they wanted to pass the upgrade test. Leiter explained to his teammates that the guild was likely testing their adaptability and also reminding adventurers that the guild isn't entirely benevolent. Sometimes, they engage in unscrupulous activities. If you're not adaptable, you're likely not suited for adventuring. After entering the dungeon, Leiter found that his 2 teammates were quite capable. They coordinated well and managed their strength effectively, though they lacked sufficient combat experience. Monsters had changed significantly in this generation. Leiter discovered a device in a corner that lured monsters and warned his teammates about an ambush ahead. The rookie adventurers were skeptical, having only fought monsters and never humans before. As a seasoned adventurer, Leiter took the lead to distract a large man, allowing his frontline teammate to step in and take over. This move gave Leiter the chance to deal with the ranged attackers and mages behind. The frontline fighter and the mage worked together to also knock out the large man. These 3 were also testies, trying to prevent the rookies from leveling up. Leiter told his teammates that, in the dungeon, they should beware of monsters and such malicious people. His teammates realized how valuable a reliable senior was and willingly followed Leiter's commands. Actually, Leiter had figured out these 3 were not real testies, but people sent by the guild to assess them, using this as a teaching moment for his teammates on what to watch for in dungeons. Regarding Leiter's new account, it had already attracted attention at the guild. Leiter was mysterious and faceless, so rumors circulated that he was a fugitive. The guild, concerned that Leiter might attack other adventurers, instructed the receptionist to keep a close eye on him. Leiter informed his teammates that to reach the guild's designated destination, they must pass through a boss room and should prepare to defeat the boss. At that moment, a pair of new testies arrived and even harassed the mage. Leiter quickly intervened, scaring the new testies away. He let them enter the test area first, allowing his teammates to observe. As expected, the new recruits were defeated and carried out by the guild's staff. The frontline fighter didn't want to back down and led the mage into the room. Leader felt their attitude was excellent, as adventurers who can't muster courage are often eliminated. The boss of this level turned out to be a cute king, crossed out. The teammates were initially startled but quickly regained their composure, eager to defeat the boss and return to the guild. Leader remarked that reaching the endpoint was sufficient, but he didn't want to dampen their enthusiasm. At this point, the frontline fighter had already charged in. Leader told the mage to keep channeling magic, confident that the two could defeat the giant slime. He only intervened when they nearly faltered. After the mage completed her spell, the slime couldn't withstand the magic attack and collapsed. Leader instructed the frontline fighter to deliver the final blow, who then struck the slime's core. Leader pulled out 3 bottles and handed them to his teammates, informing them of the high value of slime. As they collected the slime, other testees tried to rush to the endpoint to take advantage, but the mage remained calm. She recalled the examiner's mention of a reward for reaching the endpoint first, which was another guild trap. The eager testees rushing forward were knocked out by sleeping gas. After all, adventurers only need to complete the mission within the time limit, and haste is generally their downfall. The 3 successfully reached the endpoint and received badges proving they passed the exam along with 3 small gifts. Before leaving, Leader took them to the second level of the dungeon, which, unlike the dim and abandoned first level, was like a small world with sunlight underground. Leader only wanted to show them the area, not advocating for immediate exploration since they hadn't yet returned their badges. Moreover, there were traps on the way back, and the guild had prematurely taken away the carriage, forcing them to walk back. Furthermore, guild members were tracking them to assess the candidate's character. Passing the exam but showing poor conduct could still prevent advancement. Fortunately, all 3 displayed good character and smoothly became bronze-level adventurers. Both teammates were grateful for Leader's guidance and recognized his greater ambitions, not pressing him to form a team, but hoping for future collaborations. Sheila, the receptionist, found Leader and revealed she had guessed his identity. She knew that running 2 accounts could lead to consequences if reported. Leader explained his predicament, unable to share his situation with the guild, and willing to leave if pursued. Sheila confessed she hadn't reported him yet. It was her brother who had tracked Leader's group that day, so there was no worry about information leakage. She promised to keep his secret, hoping Leader would reveal the truth, and presented a magical contract. If Sheila disclosed any information, she would lose her job and become a slave. Sheila made this vow not only to maintain the guild's stability and confirm Leader's dual registration was not malicious, but also because Leader had once helped her. Many in the guild were grateful to Leader and wanted to assist him in his troubles. Leader signed the contract first, but did not make Sheila sign. He removed his hood and half of his mask, revealing that an accident had turned him into an undead, a form that could frighten people. He asked Sheila to carefully consider whether to keep his secret. Sheila expressed her trust in Leader's goodness, noting that many adventurers had benefited from his kindness, and she promised to continue helping him keep his secret. Thus, Leader introduced Sheila to Rowling. Rowling remarked on Sheila's courage for following Leader, known as a monster, to the home of someone called a witch. As they talked, Rowling tested Sheila, still viewing her as a potential threat. If Sheila showed any fear, Rowling might consider eliminating the threat, but Sheila was determined and passed Rowling's test. Sheila also brought news of many new adventurers disappearing in the kingdom. Coupled with Leader's mysterious background and rapid advancement, this led to jealousy and rumors about him. Rowling suggested Leader avoid the dungeon for a few days, while Sheila returned to the guild. The guild leader also hinted at understanding the situation, but neither explicitly disclosed Leader's identity. Although Leader didn't go to the dungeon, he visited the weapon shop because the blacksmith said the weapon was ready. Leader could now use 3 types of power: magical damage, sword energy, and holy power for healing. Normally, only divine beings possess healing abilities, but Leader, having once repaired a dilapidated temple, acquired this skill and doesn't know which deity it involved, assuming it was a minor god. He asked the blacksmith for another wooden stake to try combining the 3 powers into a secret technique. However, combining magical and physical damage proved difficult. the blacksmith gave him another sword to experiment with. When Leader tried to stack the powers, the sword disintegrated, and the stake was polished into a wooden ball. The blacksmith said that even the specially crafted weapon couldn't withstand all three powers together, and suggested Leader carry multiple weapons. But Leader was short on funds and wondered how to make money, especially since he couldn't take guild quests at the moment. He overheard someone by the road asking adventurers to take on a job not posted by the guild, which most adventurers rejected. Leader inquired, and the person said they needed someone to defeat the Lake Master. Leader brought this person to Rowling's house. The man explained he was from a village to the east, where a legend persisted about offering beautiful girls to the Lake Master for protection. However, the Lake Master didn't exist until recently, when it appeared and devoured a girl acting as a sacrificial offering. Now it demanded regular sacrifices, and the villagers, unable to defeat it, had already lost several girls, including this man's sister, who was also chosen. Leader felt something was off, but went to the village anyway. Because of the Lake Master, everyone stayed indoors, and marked houses had to sacrifice their girls. The Lake Master had never been seen, but supposedly his subordinates conducted his business. The sister, worried about her brother being deceived, urged Leader to abandon the task, claiming she volunteered to be a sacrifice. Leader found this odd and decided to investigate the village further. He spoke to merchants who thought he had come to see the sacrifice. They mentioned that the Lake Master was recently very angry, scaring villagers away from shopping. After observing the merchants, Leader returned to the employer. That evening, the sacrifice ceremony began. The client's sister was dressed up, and everyone thought her brother would help her escape. However, she feared the Lake Master's wrath could destroy their village, and while fearing for her life, preferred her loving family to survive. When his sister was alone, Leader approached her, saying he and her brother would find a way to deal with the Lake Master. He urged her not to give up and to struggle even if confronted by the Lake Master. Soon, the ceremony started. Leader rowed the boat, bringing the client and his sister to the center of the lake. The orb the sister held began glowing, and fog surrounded them. Leader saw what looked like a kraken, usually found in the sea, and immediately recognized it as an illusion. He destroyed the orb in her hands and activated a magical array given by Rowling, which cleared the fog on the water's surface. Indeed, the so-called Lake Master was a sham. The reality was that the merchants were using a magician to create illusions, scaring the townspeople into offering young girls as sacrifices. Because Leader arrived in time, he dealt with the merchants, exposed their scheme, and the girls who were deceived as sacrifices were saved and returned to their village. The siblings were very grateful to Leader, and before leaving, the sister gave him a kiss as a thank you. Since these merchants only kidnapped females, Leader concluded they were not related to the disappearance of adventurers. However, he still turned them over to the guards. Adventurers do not only take on high-paying quests, they occasionally serve the town's residents by accepting clearly unprofitable quests. Leader often did this in the past. Recently unable to go to the dungeon, he heard that the children at the orphanage needed dragon blood flower for medicine, offered at a very low price, so he accepted the task. Before starting the quest, Leader visited the orphanage and accidentally broke their door, which he quickly repaired using slime glue. Before he could start, he had already incurred a loss, and was even mistakenly thought to be a debt collector. However, the children at the orphanage admired adventurers, and Leader reminded them that not all adventurers have good intentions, and it's best not to approach them recklessly. The girl managing the children, named Aliji, had posted the quest. Dragon blood flower is rare and expensive. Aliji posted the quest for the sick head of the orphanage, but she told the head that she was requesting adventurers to help clean. Aliji explained that the head's illness was caused by evil spirits entering the body whenever they used their healing abilities, which were not strong enough. They needed a cleric's help to cleanse it, but that was costly, so they relied on medicine, which also was expensive and required dragon blood flower. Leader accepted the task, and before leaving, dealt with a rat monster hiding in the orphanage's basement. The rat bit Leader, and having tasted his blood, became his contracted familiar. Leader cautiously asked Rowling if he could keep it. Rowling did not make it difficult for him. Since becoming someone's familiar involved consuming their blood, Rowling joked about whether she was also Leader's master. The rat was left with them, and became one of Rowling's research subjects. That evening, Rowling made dinner for Later, adding a drop of her own blood to the meal, so Later was very satisfied. The next day he set out with the little rat, who was now living a good life with Rowling and even had its own clothes. Being undead, Later could freely move through the swamp filled with poisonous fog. The beasts here were more dangerous than those in the dungeon, but Later was no longer afraid of them. He joked about how useful his body was despite its ugly appearance, which might prevent him from marrying just before he fell into the swamp. The rat, his supposed familiar, just sat by and watched the commotion. After dealing with a fish monster in the swamp, Later placed the little rat on his shoulder. Meanwhile, Rowling was chatting with Sheila. Since the Lake Master issue was resolved, Later did not reveal his identity to the villagers. However, based on the descriptions Sheila heard, she guessed it was him. She was curious why Later wanted to become a god-level adventurer, so she asked Rowling, who said she wasn't sure since adventurers typically respect each other's privacy. Seeing Sheila's concern for Later, Rowling reassured her, expressing her trust in Later's capabilities to solve problems alone. Back in the swamp, Later encountered the Dragonkin. This time, the little rat proactively attacked, using Later's healing abilities inside the Dragonkin's stomach. Although it was spat out, it inspired Later to use his healing power as an enchantment. He decapitated the Dragonkin with a single strike. Due to its large size, Later stuffed the entire creature into his storage bag and found a large patch of dragon blood flower. He began to gather more when an elven man approached. The elf, named Isak, was also avoiding the poisonous fog and using holy water. Later didn't stop him from harvesting the dragon blood flowers. Isak mentioned he was someone's familiar, regularly collecting dragon blood flower for his master. He admired Later's strength and asked if he would accept a regular quest to gather the flowers. Later agreed, as he was already planning to farm monsters near the swamp. Isak said he would inform his master about Later. After parting ways, Later returned to the city unscathed. The coachman was impressed with his abilities. Later met with Sheila, who noticed the bulging storage bag and heard Later mention needing a professional to dissect the creature. She quickly realized that Later might have defeated the Dragonkin and hurriedly took him to a specialized dissection shop. Due to the Dragonkin's toxicity, a professional dissection room was necessary. With Later's poison resistance and clean kill, the Dragonkin's shell was well preserved and likely to fetch a good price. Sheila remarked that Later was progressing too quickly, suggesting his current strength might have reached silver rank. Later didn't take this too seriously. He felt his power was merely due to his undead body. After all, he had met Isak, who probably had gold-level strength. Later believed he was just lucky to have survived and obtained this body. If he were to become human again, he feared he would revert to his former strength. He had longed to become a god-level adventurer, but in his 10 years as a human, he made no progress, which made him hesitant about returning to human form. The next day, he took the dragon blood flower to the orphanage and met with the pharmacist and healer there. They praised the quality of the materials he had collected and mentioned that extra flowers could make more medicine to help others. Hearing this, Later offered the rest of the dragon blood flower without charging them, asking them to use it to make potions for those in need. The three were immensely grateful. Aligi was especially moved by Later and expressed a desire to become an adventurer like him to help more people. Her words touched Later, who decided to mentor her and also arranged for her to study magic with Rowling. Concerned about the tuition, Aligi said she could not incur debts without reason. Later suggested she could pay him back after becoming an adventurer, to which Aligi happily agreed. Upon learning this, Rowling wasn't troubled about teaching magic, but teased Later for being a heartbreaker and not understanding a girl's heart. Later responded that he had never interacted with young girls. Rowling got angry at the suggestion, questioning her age. Fearing a powerful curse, Later hurriedly complimented Rowling, which she suspected was learned from others. However, Later insisted it was his genuine opinion, causing Rowling to blush on the spot. That day, Later visited the Adventurers Guild. Sheila informed him that someone from the Latour family wanted to commission him for a task. Later recognized the task as Isak's commission, but was unfamiliar with the Latour family. Sheila explained that while they weren't nobility, the family was ancient and deeply connected to the city. Even the guildmaster had to show deference to them. Later felt he couldn't refuse the family's commission. but he was concerned about his monster identity being exposed, which could lead to persecution. However, he believed Isak might have already recognized his true form and planned to visit the family soon. Meanwhile, the orphanage director received the medicine for the evil spirit affliction and was very thankful for Leader's help. Leader arrived at the Latour family estate to find that the entrance was a labyrinth. "Who has a maze right at their door?" he muttered. The guard at the entrance told Leader that the family head loved studying magical devices and that the maze could change in real time. He mentioned that navigating the maze might even reward one with the family's magical devices. As a guardian who had navigated the maze, he offered Leader one piece of advice: don't trust the sun. Upon hearing he could obtain a magical device, Leader eagerly rushed into the maze, knowing that proper equipment is crucial for becoming a god-level adventurer. However, the map recording item he previously obtained was useless here. He initially thought he could memorize the layout, but after walking all morning, he realized he couldn't find his way out. After wandering in circles and suspecting errors in his mental map, Leader discovered a rest area in the middle, where a white-haired girl invited him to sit and have tea. He accepted, assuming she might be the daughter of the family. The teapot she used was also a magical device that could brew tea without leaves, valued at 300 platinum coins, a fortune that could sustain a person for a lifetime. The girl mentioned that adventurers risked their lives to retrieve such items from mazes, justifying the high price. As Leader drank tea with his mask on, the girl became interested in it and offered a high price. However, removing the mask was not an option for Leader, as it could reveal his undead identity. The girl's increased interest when Leader refused to sell did not lead her to press him. Instead, she advised him not to look at the sun before he left. After more futile wandering, Leader realized the maze included spatial displacement effects that occurred without his awareness, which explained why he couldn't find his way. Having confirmed the spatial displacement, Leader returned to the entrance to restart his navigation, finally finding the exit by evening. There, he met the family, including Laura, the girl who had made tea. She promised to give him a magical device, and took him to a basement filled with such items. Laura explained that her family had long been researching the origins of the maze, but both the maze and the magical devices remained mysterious. Not all collected devices were useful, as Laura admitted to collecting out of habit. Among the items was a drone-like device that intrigued Leader, but he sought something more practical. The drone was capable of remote sensing, but consumed a lot of magical power, so he considered it a backup option. Leader then saw a voice-controlled lamp, a painting that screamed, and hidden magical dolls. He was attacked by one of the dolls. Isak frantically searched for the device to stop the dolls. Leader had to fight the doll, recalling Rowling's mention that some dolls had inscriptions on their heads that, if altered, could stop their attacks. This doll, however, had none, forcing him to continue fighting. As Isak failed to find the stop mechanism, Leader prepared to combine his 3 skills for a final confrontation with the doll, when Laura suddenly intervened to halt the fight. When both parties stopped, Leader was worried that Laura might ask him to pay for damages since the warehouse was nearly wrecked. However, Laura wasn't angry and even invited him to continue exploring the warehouse. Guided by a mysterious instinct, Leader found vials of vampire blood stored there. Laura explained that drinking vampire blood could turn someone into a vampire, but most people ended up poisoned or insane. However, the promise of eternal life made it highly coveted by many nobles. Leader swallowed hard. In the end, he left with the drone, humorously thinking that an endless lifespan was less fun than playing with a drone. "Real men play with drones," he joked. Leader also took on the task of collecting dragon blood flower, which allowed Isak to stay home and care for Laura. Laura highly valued Leader. Besides the drone, she also gave him the vial of vampire blood. Leader felt his body craving the blood, but he knew the history. Everyone who drank it met a terrible fate. Rowling didn't care if Leader was a monster. She just wanted him alive. However, she knew he wouldn't just sit back. To become a god-level adventurer, he would take the risk. Thus, Rowling decided to support Leader. She remembered Sheila's question about why he wanted to be a god-level adventurer. Leader was surprised. "Oh, did I not mention it?" He'd forgotten himself. He thought it might be about revenge, or more accurately, breaking free from his circumstances. Leader explained that he grew up in a small village on the frontier. His parents handled procurements and errands for the village. His first trip out of the village was at age 5. At that time, he wanted to be an adventurer, but he wasn't as obsessed as he is now, and was even somewhat timid. His childhood friend, Jin Rin, was braver than him. However, on their return to the village, Lighter's family was attacked by a beast, killing his parents and grandmother. Jin Rin managed to get Lighter to safety, but the beast caught up and seriously injured her. At the last moment, a white-haired adventurer appeared, told Lighter to flee with Jin Rin, and fought off the beast alone, scaring it away. Unfortunately, despite the beast retreating, Jin Rin died. Lighter was pained and asked the adventurer why he hadn't come sooner. He knew he was imposing, but the adventurer helped transport the bodies back to the village. From then on, Lighter was determined to become an adventurer, fulfilling Jin Rin's dream. The white-haired adventurer told him he had to be 15 to become an adventurer. He was only 5, so he had 10 years to learn combat skills and about monsters, and should start by learning from the village's healer and hunter. This adventurer, who turned out to be a god-level adventurer, told Lighter he could seek him out once he became an adventurer himself. Rowling was moved by Lighter's past, and understood how his kind nature was influenced by the adventurer. Lighter vowed to become as strong as the man who saved him, and to defeat the beast that killed his family and friend. He feared death, but giving up his goal felt akin to being dead already. Thus he decided to drink the vampire blood, and told Rowling that if he turned abnormal, she should not hesitate to burn him. Rowling clenched her fists as she watched Lighter swallow the blood. At first, there was no reaction, but soon Lighter vomited blood. He felt his body undergoing wild transformations. He didn't want to become a monster like those inside the maze. At that moment, Rowling's voice rang in his ear, encouraging him to stay strong and not forget his goals. With gritted teeth, Lighter endured. Those who cared about Lighter and had been cared for by him were now thinking of him. After a long absence, Lighter felt drowsy. When he opened his eyes again, he saw Rowling flipping through a book beside him, which meant he had successfully become a vampire. Without a word, Rowling started pulling off his clothes. Lighter now had small wings on his back, which could grow or shrink at will. He also had fangs, and his eyes had turned into blood-red pupils. Rowling remarked nostalgically that it had been a long time since she had seen this familiar face and welcomed him back home. Later, Lighter would continue to accompany Rowling to collect herbs, planning to seek out his life-saving benefactor once his strength improved. Rowling said that when she was free in a while, she would go with him. "Hurry up and get me the certificate," she teased, implying they were as good as married.